Our next guest has traveled 40 hours and 12,000 miles to be here with you this morning to present a very special presentation. She's compiled a presentation for us this morning entitled The Global Connection, painting a picture of human ET contact. From early childhood, she's had numerous experiences and ongoing experiences with extraterrestrial contact. She's had 25 plus years of research and traveling the world, connecting with others who've had same contact experiences, and it's led her to the conclusion that many of the sightings and experiencers' interactions with human extraterrestrials around the world are very much linked and are of great significance. She paints a picture of what this connection means to humanity and global consciousness and awakening in her presentation this morning entitled The Global Connection, painting a picture of human ET contact. Please welcome to Starworks USA 2016, Karen Ang.
Thank you. I had a dream, and I'm watching television screen with my husband, and we see a newscaster come on. And the newscaster is very worried, and behind her is a monitor. And on the monitor are the words, nuclear strike. So I'm looking at this, and my husband's standing beside me, and we're in disbelief. And she goes on to talk about a nuclear war. And in the background, behind her on the wall, missiles are flying in opposite directions, and they're hitting the planet, and they're making all of these huge mushroom clouds. I'm thinking at this time, I must get my children, I must get my family to limestone caves, because as a child I used to go to the coast, and on the coast there would be these limestone caverns that I would play in. So I knew I had to get my family to these limestone caverns. So we drive down to the coast, and I'm rushing my family and telling them, walk down the stairs, run down these stairs, get into the limestone caverns. I just knew I had to do this. But as I did so, a missile flew across the sky and looked like it was going to go over the horizon. But it didn't. It exploded on the horizon. And as the light began to come towards me and come towards the family, there was resolution. It was out of my hands and out of our hands. And then suddenly in the sky above us appeared these silver discs, suddenly blinking in all over the place. And as they were blinking in, they were rushing through people. They were scanning them from head to toe, pulling some up, scanning from head to toe, leaving some behind, scanning and lifting these people up and leaving others behind. And then a ray hit me, and it scanned me from the top of my head down to my toes. And at that moment, I knew I had to make a decision. And I pleaded with them, please, please take my family. Please leave me here. Just take my family. The dream ended, and it was just a dream. My name is Karen, and I'm so happy to be here. It's lovely of you to come and see me on this Sunday morning. I know everybody's exhausted and probably loaded up with information. And I'd like to thank Paula and the Starworks team for all of the hard work that they do and for inviting me here. So what we're going to... Yeah, I think so. It's amazing. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the global connection of ET contact. And it's very ironic because as I've been sitting here watching other speakers over the weekend, it really is a global connection. And what I've noticed is we have teams from Italy, from Turkey, from South America, from America, and here from Australia, and we're all talking about the same thing. Is that a coincidence? I don't think it is. Sorry, I forgot to say from Central America too, from Jaime. And I think all of us at some stage have asked these questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? And who's going to help us to get there? Throughout history, we've recorded the stories of our lives and the stories of our encounters on the walls of caves, in any of the writing that we do, in the poetry we write, in the photographs we take, in the movies that we make, in the books that we write, and we leave them to our family and we pass them down to other members of the community, because these stories are important to us. They're the stories that impact on us. They're the stories that we want to hand down to future generations. And today is part of my story that I'd like to share with you and share with future generations to come. So, you probably know I'm from Australia, if you haven't picked up the accent yet. It's not a hard guess, but I come from the most remote capital city on the planet. And as we leave Laughlin here, which is where we are at Aquarius, you'll see how remote we are. Now, remote can be good or it can be bad, and in our case, I think it's been very positive, because we are about 4,000 kilometres from the nearest major centre. So as we travel across the ocean here, the Pacific Ocean, and over to the west, you can see below us there is nothing until you hit the Antarctic. And then to our left is nothing until we hit South Africa. To the north is nothing until we get to Indonesia. And to the east is Sydney. This means that we have very clear skies and we're very unique. We have a lot of flora and fauna that's completely unique, and we get lots and lots of UFO activity there. I can ask almost anybody if they've seen any activity and they will tell me they have, or they know somebody who has. So growing up in Perth, it was a very beautiful, green, lush, lovely environment. As a child, I could wander the streets. But as I was researching over the course of my life, I realised that there were periods in my life where I was having these abilities, and they would continue to grow. And I'll share a couple of those with you. So around this time, we had animals, and we were travelling around Australia, and I found I could talk to animals. And when I'm saying talk to animals, I'm not patting them and having the usual little girl conversations. I'm talking about full-blown psychic conversations, no different than what I'm having here, and they would teach me stuff. They would teach me to be safe. They'd teach me to use my senses. I didn't realise nobody else could do that. Around the ages of 7 to 10, I had these other learnings. We moved into a house that was near bushland, and suddenly an imaginary friend came into my life who didn't live in the house with me. He lived in the bushland across the road, and I would go over there and talk to him, and he would teach me. He was like a grandfather or an older uncle, a very serene being, and this is a representation of him. Now, he would take me into the bushland and teach me how to communicate with the trees, and I would sit in the trees and they would tell me stories and they would nurture me. But I would also start to have missing time here, and I would start to find myself waking paralysed in unusual places, like in the bushland or on a road. And I was paralysed when I came to, and I didn't realise what was going on to me. It was quite scary. At this time, my younger brother and I shared a bedroom which overlooked the backyard. And in the morning, sometimes he would run to my mother and say to her, "Mummy, there's an aeroplane in the backyard last night." But it didn't take off like an aeroplane. It went whoosh, straight up into the sky. And I used to think, you're not allowed to tell this story. You're not allowed to let anybody else know. When we left and went to England when I was 10 years of age, to live in England for a year. And I thought my imaginary friend would come with me, and he said, "No, this is your journey now. You don't need me in your life at the moment, but we will meet again in the future." And I was devastated. So between the ages after, just getting back to this, when we returned back from England, I had a sister who had a new baby. Her name was Donna. And I would stay in these apartments, which is right near the coast, near these limestone cliffs. And we would go down to the coast, and we had a beautiful relationship. I spent all of my school holidays with her and every second weekend. But these really unusual things started to happen. I was stuck in these time frames where I was completely still, I was in the moment, and yet everything around me was speeding up. And I didn't realise it at the time, that potentially I was being taught about this interdimensional and time difference. It used to scare me. Also at this time I developed precognition skills. And there was a time about a year later where, after this photograph was taken, where whenever the phone rang on the weekend or in the evening, I would just get this panic. I would launch out of bed and run up the passageway and be waiting for terrible, terrible news, which never came. And my parents thought I was a bit like, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. Then one night, the phone rang on a Friday night, about 9:15. And I got up and I went down the passageway and I could see my mother. And I could hear her voice tone changing. And I could see her becoming distressed, and I knew immediately something terrible had happened. And in fact, my niece, Donna, who was one in this photo, she was 2 and had died in her sleep. And I was devastated. But I knew that this was coming. And I didn't understand it then. Again, I thought everyone had these abilities. I had lots of ghostly and poltergeist experiences through my teens, met my future husband-to-be. And at the age of around 25, I started to question spirituality, which I'm sure we all have. None of the churches, none of the religions ever had any answers for me. I was confused, like it didn't make any sense. These, the jigsaw puzzles weren't fitting together, the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. So I started to get into meditation. Suddenly I'd find myself doing hands-on healing on people, on my children. I would go into their bedroom at night and I'd be told just to hold my hands in certain ways, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just giving them this energy. No one had taught me to do this. I started to automatic write. I would get these messages, still the mind, I want to speak. And so I would still my mind and get my pen and all these words would come out. And there were also times where I'd be spending a lot of time with my sister, who was very spiritual, and she was quite psychic at that time. And we started to do meditations. And then one night we did a small meditation, which we thought was 15 minutes. When we came back into our bodies, 3 hours had passed. And we shared a journey together. And the journey was into this courtyard, which looked like a Roman courtyard or an old Greek courtyard, and in walked into the courtyard this man who looked like Plato, I guess, this man who was dressed in robes and he had this beautiful white beard and he was very wise. And I thought, this is what I need to ask. I'm here to ask this question, the secrets of the universe, what is it about? And rather than answer me, he grabbed a single tiny pebble and he dropped it in a pond. And it caused these ripples, little tiny ripples to start with, and then bigger ripples and bigger ripples. Till the time it got to the end of the pond, there were these little waves. And it would reverberate off the pond and come back in larger waves. And I thought, this is really cliche. What does it mean? And he said, take this message back with you. What is a small ripple now will become an immense wave further away. The further away you get from that point of origin, the larger the waves become. But let it be known, the law of the universe commands, that which is given must in kind be returned. And I really got it. I really got it then. I thought, whatever we do here, you can apply this to anything. Whatever we do on this planet, the tiniest little thing, if it's a negative, if we drop a bomb, that might cause a small crater in one country, but it causes reverberation of negative energy, that explosion. So by the time it's hitting the other end of the universe, it's a tidal wave. But it must come back to us. So if we're sending out that negative energy, it's going to return to us, but it's going to return exponentially. And I believe that this is what the ancients really called karma. When I also was in my 20s, and late 20s, I started to become, I separated from my husband and moved into a house with my 3 children. He was living in Papua New Guinea, where I had come back from, and I was in a small unit with my children in the back rooms, and I would be in the front room, and I was starting to get these visitors. And it seemed that there were 2 or 3 groups of visitors which I couldn't differentiate between. One was a group of human-like, beautiful people, this group of humans that would visit, and they wouldn't come into my room. They'd be sort of out in the living areas. And they would sort of say, you're part of us, it's okay, don't be afraid, we're here, we're just monitoring you. And I thought they were ghosts. And then there would be the others who would come into my room at night, and they would be these shadow people. They were tall shadow people. They were short, scrunchy, ugly-looking shadow people. And I remember having a 6-month period where I had to sleep every night with the light on. And, you know, being a mother, I was going to university, I was working, I was trying to raise 3 sons alone, and they were young. And my parents said to me, "Look, you can't be doing this. You really need to, you know, if you think something's coming into your room, tell it to leave. Tell it to leave you alone. You need your rest. You don't want it there." So one night I did, and I must say that every single night at 2:22 I would wake up and these things would be coming into the room. I was completely paralysed. So this night I thought, you know what, damn it, I am not going to be intimidated anymore. I want my life back. So I stood up in the room and I said to them, "Look, I don't want you here. Whoever you are, go to the light. Leave me alone. You're making me afraid, and it's not fair. I don't want you here. Please do not visit me again." So I turned off the lights and opened the curtains to my bedroom because there was a street light outside. So I thought, well, I'm not really sleeping with the light on. I'm actually just sleeping with the curtains open. And I drifted off to sleep. And 2:22 comes around, and I wake, and I'm paralysed. And I look at the clock. It's 2:22. I look around the room and get to the window, and it was winter, and the windows get foggy. You know how you can write in them? And on the window was this writing, "We will not leave you alone. You're part of us, and we will always be with you." Well, that terrified me, so I got to the point where I could actually move a limb, and then I was out of that bed with the light on. And I looked at the window and the writing wasn't there, and I thought, great, I've imagined it, this is fantastic. So I closed the curtains, left the light on, and I sat there until dawn. And about a few minutes later I could hear this rustling in the kitchen. And my 2 oldest boys shared a room at the back of the house which overlooked parkland. And the oldest slept on the bottom bunk, his name's Daniel, and Andrew, the second son, slept on the top bunk. So I'm hearing him rustling around, and I get up because it's unusual, and Daniel looks at me at the age of 9 and says, "Mum, how did you sleep last night?" And I thought, that's a really odd question for him to ask me. I said, "I didn't sleep that well actually, how did you sleep?" And he said, "Mum, I was in bed last night, I got woken up with this thing in my face." And I said, "What?" He said, "A ball of light. It was in my face and it scared me. It had these lines running through, and it's like it went to take a picture or to snap at me." And he said it was flying through the room. It was going through the drawers, into the wardrobe, out of the wardrobe, under the beds, through the beds, and then it left and exited out this unit that I was in, through a double brick wall, and into the apartment next door, into the unit next door. And so Daniel is pushing on the top of this bunk saying, "Andrew, Andrew, wake up, Andrew." And Andrew's stirring, going, "Oh, you know, leave me alone, Daniel." And he's persisting saying, "Andrew, wake up." And as soon as Andrew opened his eyes, this ball of light comes shooting back into the room, hovering at his face on the second bunk, taking a photo. And it goes around the room and it's going through everything, snapping photos, and then it exits through a closed window again. That will become important shortly, and so will this. Then I was having these periods where I would wake up and I was being, for want of another word, strobed or read like a barcode. Completely normal, completely awake, just as awake as I am with you today, but completely paralysed. And I had this beam of light that was going down my spine, and it was about that wide and about 1 centimetre thick, half an inch maybe. And it would start the noise. I could hear the noise, I could see the laser, this light, and I could feel it going through my bones. And when it got to my ears, it was like this buzzing that just went down to my body. And as it got through my body, it exited my feet, and instantly it was back at my head scanning me again. And I thought initially I must be having a seizure, until I thought, well, I wouldn't be conscious if I'm having a seizure. And that's curious, everything was fun, and it didn't hurt me, and I wasn't scared. It was just really odd. It didn't make sense to me at the time. At this time too, I was doing a lot of shamanic breathing and energy work with my brother. And so one day he's practicing on me, and normally, you know, we do the breathing exercise and then go, let's go back to your childhood. But instantly, boom, I'm in this, what I can only describe as a room which is not unlike a pyramid and the tomb inside a pyramid. And I was laid on a stone which was raised off the floor. And it wasn't cold, but it was scary. It was very dark. And into this room, I could see the silhouettes of these people. There were 6 men. I think they were men, but they were dressed in these unusual robes and headpieces that looked like a Greek Orthodox priest. So you can imagine my surprise yesterday when Jaime's showing this Greek Orthodox priest dropping out of the sky, and it just, that's them. That's them. So they stood on either side of the corner of this stone and one on each side of me, and they started to tone. And as they started to tone, a light appeared right above me, and the light started to open, and it opened and it opened, and gradually the light joined me, and I was taken up through this light, and I was taken up further and further and further. And then this voice came to me and said, "It's okay, I'm with you." And it was my imaginary friend from when I was 7. He said, "I told you I would be back. I'm going to take you somewhere." So he took me up through the night sky, through the darkness, into a sky where the stars started to appear. And on my right, there was like a crystal city floating in the sky. And I thought, that's really odd. You know, I'm dreaming. And he said, "No, what you're seeing is real." And I said, "What is that place?" He said, "Acacia." And I, in my head, I thought, "You mean the Akashic records?" And he's like, no, that's Acacia. That's where you're from." And I thought, okay, this is really interesting. Why am I here? And he said, "Look up." And as he looked up, the fabric of the sky opened and this black vortex appeared, like a black hole. And he said, "I can't go any further than this, but you can." And with that, it was like this hand come through, this really gentle hand, which I was afraid to take. And my imaginary friend is saying, "It's okay, you can go. Take the hand." And then I had this moment, this really religious moment, that I thought, I'm being taken to heaven. I'm going to meet Jesus. And my prayers are answered because now I know the truth. So as I was taken up through this hole, I can't tell you the sight that was before me, and it was this. It was multiverse after universe, after nebula, and it was many years before the Hubble telescope ever sent any pictures back. It was many, many years before the Hubble telescope ever took photographs of the crystal nebula that I had seen. And I can't tell you, the energy of that place was so breathtakingly beautiful, it's indescribable. And the only thing I can relate it to is the movie Contact, where Jodie Foster is taken and suddenly she stops and she doesn't want to blink and her eyes are dripping with tears and she can't even speak, and she's just saying, "This is so beautiful, this is so beautiful, you should have sent a poet." I can relate to that because that's exactly what I saw. So I'm thinking, oh sorry, I'll just get back to that. I asked what I was seeing, and this voice said to me, "This is home. This is our home, but not yet, not for you." And with that, I came back into my body. When I did that, my brother was looking at me, ashen face. He said, "You've been levitating off the ground for an hour and a half, an inch." He goes, "I don't know where you went to." But I knew when I come back that this is so petty, this earth and what we fight over and what we do, it's meaningless, because our home, where we are all connected, is so perfect that when we disconnect from that, we forget it, and we spend the rest of our lives wanting to reconnect with that which is already within us. Another time I was doing toning, and we were doing this breathing exercise. There was about 12 of us doing toning. We sounded like a crystal bowl. And we were getting into this. It's great. This is hum. And suddenly these 3 beings appear into this circle. And it was almost like they were very indignant. "Well, you've called us. Hello. Is anyone home? What do you want?" And these were live light beings. And when you're doing a meditation, you've got your eyes closed, but then you peek through your eyes and you can see people walking around. And I'm thinking, why is the group up walking around when we're still holding hands? No one's broken the circle and this toning's happening. And one of the beings walked up to me and he looked at my face because he knew I could see him, and he got his finger and he poked me in the belly, in my sacral plexus. And with that I yelped. It was a physical, like if I came up to you and did it now, it was just as physical as that. And then I squealed, broke the cycle, and they just zipped up. But my message to that was, look, call us again when you get rid of that fear. That's what it was. And they were very, very real. So I started to get into the shamanic work, and I went and spent time with the Aboriginal people up in a very remote area. And I walked with the earth, and I really got what they meant, because when you're still, the earth speaks to you. And I had my own female Aboriginal guide, which was the earth, and she was telling me about the law of the land and where you can go and where you can't, and energies and winds, and be the gentle breeze. So after that, I started to draw these symbols, and these symbols were triangles with circles on the end of them, and I couldn't figure out what it is. Constantly, you know, when you're constantly doodling the same image. So I decided that, you know, this must mean something. And what I've found since then is once you go on a quest for your answers, for your experiences, it will take you on journeys you never believed you could go on. I call them our guideposts, or our mashed potato moments, like the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, how there's this mashed potato moment where he's saying this means something, he's building a tower. And like that, with us, if we have something that's impacting on us so strongly, we really do need to follow those urges. And what those urges did was made me read a book. I picked up a book by a certain man called Dr. Stephen Greer, ironically, and the CCX symbol was the triangle with the circles. So I was basically on the next plane to Crestone, and I undertook the training with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I had some really good insights because suddenly I could differentiate between what was occult, what was supernatural, and what was extraterrestrial. And then I could see a lot of my teachings were coming from extraterrestrials. So once I learned to follow the signposts, once I learned to follow the guideposts that I've been given, these symbols, I decided that I could trust my own instincts. And I heard about the Be Witness event in Mexico City with Jaime Maussan presenting a body. And I just knew I had to be there. I thought, something's going to happen there. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be extremely important. So again, it took me 3 hours to book a ticket. I call them my pushers in the back. It's like, you've got to go there. So I don't fight it now. I just follow my instincts. And you might have heard about the Be Witness event where a lot of information and technical knowledge and medical knowledge was presented, and it was about this little person. And they've done a full 3D recreation of the body. And they presented it, which was amazing. But the thing that struck me the most wasn't that. There was a man standing in the audience prior to the 6-hour presentation even started. And he was a Mayan man who was the most serene-looking being I have ever seen. He was, you know, this completely beautiful profile, beautiful long hair, standing there. He never moved an inch. He never changed his facial expression, except for once. And he stood with his back to the stage, and he was just looking at all the audience members. And that's what he did for about an hour. And I knew there was something very special about this man. And my friend and I, my girlfriend and I, thought, this is not human. He's not human. He has this I just knew there was something very, very special about this man. And we were trying to get a photograph of him, but couldn't. Every time we'd go to take a photo, he would look at us. Every time we go to do some video, it would turn out hazy like this is. And then there was one time that he caught my eye, and a little wry corner of his mouth just smiled. And I knew, he knew, that I knew he was not human. And it got to that point that at the end of the presentation, I really felt that he was going to be standing there saying, brothers and sisters, here we are. Okay, here's the truth, let's work together. So the lights go on, the stage is empty, and so is the seat where he was sitting. And I thought, oh well, never mind, that's okay. So my friend and I go back to our hotel room. It was quite a journey getting back because there was about 8,000 people leaving this place, and we had to get a taxi. So it was about an hour later, an hour and a half later. And you know when you've been out and you're taking photos and you're taking videos, and the first thing you do when you get home is you check them. And at the end of the presentation, I'd been holding my camera out like this, and I'm taking these photographs because I thought, oh, I need to get the summary slides. So I've taken these photographs, checking through, I get to one of the photographs, and that was the image. He was not on stage. This image, and I've validated it with Jaime Maussan, I've validated it with the people who put together his program, and I said to them, is this image on your slides? And they said, no, we don't know where on earth this come from. But I'm looking at the profile of that, and I'm thinking, this is him. And what struck me about this is I'm very much a skeptic. It has to be a light anomaly, it has to be a reflection, it's this, that, and it's the other. But what really struck me was that people in the audience were also holding up their phone. And if you can look at the two circles in the audience, he's in those images. This person is there, this light being is there, and he's reflecting the light on the bottom of the stage. And these other people have this same image in their camera. I don't know whether they took photos or they were doing what I'm doing, but somewhere out there these people may have other photographs, and that would be sensational. But not only this, the next photograph as well. Again, in the audience, you can see that the image is there. But the thing that struck me was this. He appeared between the human and the extraterrestrial illustrations. And to me, he was saying, you're right, I am extraterrestrial. Half extraterrestrial, half human being. And I think the message I got from that was they want to meet us, but out of, hey, 7,000, 8,000 people, one person saw them. So, you know, they know that we are just prepared to meet them, but how did they present themselves in a way that that we would understand them? And this made no sense to me. I'm like, a light being, this is crazy. How? It just doesn't happen. So I got invited last year to introduce Hami Masan, and this is how I validated these photographs. And I get back to Perth and get a message in my Facebook account. And the message is, hello Karen, my name's Roy. I was in Perth in 1973 and I saw a UFO. It was really bizarre and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no worries, that's fine. You know, I get these all the time. It's like, I'll get to that. It's an old story. He rang me back and he said, I need to meet you. I noticed that you have the similar friends to me. How did you find Mexico City? And I went, I found it very nice. He goes, what did it feel like? And I said, I went to say it felt like home, you know. He said, it felt like home, didn't it? And I went, yeah, you know, what makes you say that? He said, because you're going back. I'm like, I am? He said, you're going back and I have information for you, but I'm not going to give it to you over the phone. I'll come there and meet you, or you can come here. And I thought, great, I'm going to go and meet this person. I got to talk to him and I felt really comfortable, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. So I'd organised to go 2 weeks later. Again, I'm getting these pushes in the back, and within those 2 weeks I'm getting these urges to go to the beach, look up, go to the beach. So no problems, I go to the beach, as I'm told. And one night, it was about 10:30 when I had this urge, you know, and this pull on the ear, so out I am with a coffee. And so I'm thinking, well, all right, if I see anything, I need a witness. So there was a person at the other end of this, of a phone, a Facebook FaceTime. So they were looking at me and I'm talking to them. And I'm parked in this car park right on the coast. So to the right of the photo, there's restaurants and cafes and beautiful parkland. The building that with the white structures on top is our Surf Lifesaving Club, and this is in a suburb called Mullaloo, which is about 700 metres from where I live. And I'm facing the trees in the car park, which, so I'm parked in this position at night. I want you to note too how many car parking spots there are. There's about 180 in this particular car park and about 200 in the one on the other side of the park. So I'm at this park and I can see this light flick in the sky. Now we have a lot of planes, and I've been living in Perth for 55 and a half years, so I know that the fly past, and I thought, oh, is it a plane or not? Didn't take much notice of it. And I'm talking to this person, and then I see another flash over the coast, over the water, and I thought, oh well, it must be this plane that's just going in that direction. And I continued to talk to this person. And during the day, this is the view of me parked at that place. So it's open bushland, open parkland, surrounded by lots of houses and built up areas. So I'm talking to this person, some of the lights start to go off. And the park light goes off, and I'm seeing some rustling around, and I'm talking to this person going, there's some rustling here, and out of the shadows walks this fox. But it didn't look like a fox, it was like it was a half fox and half wolf. And I'm thinking, what is this thing doing on the beach? We have foxes, but they're usually in rural areas, not on the beach, and it's staring at me. And then it starts to walk around the car. So you've got this right at the top of the photograph. This is what the fox did. It walked around and looked at me and walked in front of the car and looked at me again and walked a couple of paces down and turned and looked. And so I'm out of the car with this phone trying to tell this person, look, there's a fox. And it looks at me again, and then it goes down the parkway and to the beach. And I don't think anything of it. Get back in the car and continue my conversation. Then all the lights go off. And I realise it's really late. Suddenly I find myself completely alone, parked in this car park. Excuse me. When I should see some movement, and into the car park drives this red car, this red hatchback. And it drives all the way around the park. There's only one way in and one way out. And where should it park but here? Right here, close enough to me so I can't even open the door. And I'm talking to this person going, doesn't that just irritate you? When you go to the movies and, it's an empty theatre and you grab your popcorn, you grab your drink and you're sitting there going, this is great, and then one other person walks in and sits right beside you. So I said, look, this is ridiculous. So I continue my conversation and there's this man sitting in the car. He's a young man. He would be in his early 20s. And beside him is a woman who looked like she was in her 30s, and she had her hair tied back in a bun, and she's looking at a device on her lap, which I presumed was a mobile phone. It was throwing off light on her face. And he's sitting forward in his car and he's trying to get my attention and wants me to look at him, which I think, he's just a silly kid. So he's looking at me and I'm saying to this person, oh God, this kid next door, oh yeah, whatever. And when somebody's trying to make eye contact and you don't want to make eye contact, so you keep moving away. Anyway, he stands out of his car, opens the door, and he's staring at me. And I'm saying to this person, oh great, he's walking around the car and then he stops between his car and my car and he's staring at me. And I'm thinking this is a practical joke. He walks in front of the car, looks at me, walks a few paces down, turns back, walks a few paces down towards the beach, turns back again. And I said to my friend, there's more than one fox, obviously, tonight. What is going on? And why would he park this? I was feeling like something was happening. I wasn't afraid. And my friend is saying, why are you there? Move. And I'm like, no, they're not doing anything unusual. If they were going to rob me or murder me, then surely this woman would be on the lookout. She'd be really, and she wasn't. She did not look up from this device. So I'm talking, and then I notice this man's walking towards the back passenger seat of my car. And by this time I'm starting to feel, oh my God, please don't get in because I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Anyway, he just goes to hold the door handle and then he walks around to the back of his car, lifts up the car boot, continues to look at me, walks back to the door, continues to look at me, and I'm like, okay, he gets back in the car and the whole routine starts again. Goes through this process twice. And at the second time he opens the door and I do catch eye contact and he goes like that and waves at me. So I was like, oh, it's all good. Wave at him. By this time I'm tired and nothing's happened and I decide to leave. So as I'm pulling out of the car park, as I'm pulling out of that bay, my lights hit his car and I notice there's no number plate. And that was a bit spooky. I'm thinking, how are these kids doing this? Anyway, next minute I'm on the plane to Townsville and I meet Roy. I get there late. And he gave me a heap of documents. He said, look, go to bed, have a shower, go to bed. We've got a lot to talk about tomorrow. So I thought, that's great. Yeah, I'll talk about things tomorrow. But I didn't realise that I didn't know his surname. And he gave me information about a president that he had written to in order to find a person who had had a very similar experience to him. So the president's name is Fox. And I think, oh, that's very funny. Very cute. And I find out Roy's surname is Fox. And the hairs on the back of my neck, I was like, okay, I've got to follow the fox. He has something I need to know. So the next day, he tells me about his experience with his wife that happened in Trigg. It's called Trigg Beach, so it's a suburb on the coastline. And in 1973, it was March 31st, they're driving towards the coast and she comments, isn't the moon big tonight? And he's seeing the moon behind him in the rearview mirror. So they pull over and they have 3 hours of missing time. And they describe this ship as like an organic ship that's just glowing this orange light. And it was huge. This thing was massive. And it was coming down and it was looking at them. And they said it was about 50 metres away from them. And they stood having this interaction. She was mesmerised and in this euphoric state. He was having this psychic communication with them. And they said, as they were watching this craft, quicker than the blink of an eye, shifted its position from 50 metres off the coast to beyond an island called Rottnest Island. And they watched it there. So this is the actual size of the ship. That's the area it takes up. It would be about 500 metres. It would be as big as this room, easy. It was huge. And they said it shifted position, which is 12 miles off the coast. This is an island called Rottnest. And it stayed there for a while. They could see the glow from behind the island. It was reflecting on the clouds above. Now, Rottnest Island is a little island off the coast. It's very unique to the world because it's the only place that we have these little marsupials called quokkas. And they're the selfie animal of the planet, apparently. We get people from all over the world going there and they have to have a selfie with these cute little animals that look like they're posing, and they're so sweet, but they're the only place in the world that these exist. And they're a cross between a kangaroo and a rat. They're a little marsupial and they're really sweet. They're so friendly. It's shifted its position back again to right in front of them. And they're having a psychic connection with Roy saying, we're taking specimens. But they'd given him a message that they would like for him to go, and he was afraid to go. He said, I'm getting married next year and I want a family and just not ready. And he said with that he thought, I wish I had a gun because I want to shoot a bullet at this plasma to see if there's anything that would reflect off, that it would bounce off. And he said as soon as he had that thought, it just disappeared. By the time they got home, 3 hours had passed. From that moment, Diane just accepted that it was a natural part of life. This is what happens. But Roy spent a lot of time looking for answers.
The last 10, 20 years, can we get the head around why she didn't realise the majesty and the significance of this paradigm-shifting experience? And I was a little annoyed. I thought, what we've been through. You know, it's like watching the Moses part of the Red Sea. That's all right, you know. But it's just how she perceived. As Carlos said, the idea of a close encounter of the first kind is to rattle your worldview. Some people will do the dying route. It's interesting, I'll get on this one. And some people will grab it by the throat and not let it go until they get some answers. So they're not forced to ignore it completely. You're not forced to do any of those scenarios. But that's the idea of it in the first place. Those that will learn or go on and try and make some sense of it often find a new way. That's the way I went. And some will do what Diane's done. Okay, and I guess to Diane's point of view, I've been crazy to come up so obsessed with the way I did, and to do what I've done and searched out, and places I've been and people I've met, just to get to meet Diaz, to get to the ship.
Well, I could liken that to a butterfly. If you see a butterfly, you can look at it and you can marvel at it, or you can decide to become a butterfly collector.
That's a very interesting analogy.
Yeah, I just don't, I can marvel at these things and I can appreciate these things and I can know that these things exist without becoming a collector.
But why, what would be the point of a butterfly visiting you if it didn't have something to say to you?
Well, it may have, I just can't recollect.
Okay,
It may have, you know.
So you're looking more at the experience, enjoying that experience for what it was and letting it go.
Well, what's the point of it? Just is the experience. It's her. That's the point of experience for her. For me, that thing came from somewhere. Showed an interest in us twice and did all things. To me, I want to know why. Whereas she said, oh, it's just a happy experience. I'm not criticising her, but me, I want to know why.
So Roy's a bit like me. I want to know why. This means something, this mashed potato moment. So about 10 years later, he picks up a magazine and there's a photograph in it. And the photograph is a lightship that was taken by a man called Carlos Diaz in Tepoztlan in Mexico. Does anyone know the Carlos Diaz story yet? Great. This is incredible. Now, I had never wanted to go to Mexico in my life, and suddenly I get this push in the back to go to Mexico. See this man who's Mayan, get this light being, and I'm looking for answers, and this is why I went to see Roy, the fox. So I'm following the fox, and the fox, Roy, went to Mexico because he needed answers he wanted to speak to this man called Carlos Diaz. And because he was the only one he knew on the planet that had these similar experiences and saw these same ships. So off he trots to Tepoztlan, and he meets Carlos Diaz. Now, this is an actual photograph that Carlos had taken. He'd been sent by a magazine to take a photograph of a sunrise. So he got to this place about 3:30 in the morning and gets his camera ready, and he thinks the sun's rising, but it's really early. And up from the valley slowly moves this light ship. And it's moving that slowly. He can take his camera and he's snapping photographs of it moving up. Now, the photographs are reflecting off the bonnet of his car. It's moving upwards. He's taking photos. He gets out of the car, continues to take these photographs, and this thing just shoots off. And he was agar with this. Such a moving experience. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he has this all documented. And he becomes possessed with it. He goes back every single night for 2.5 months because he wants to know what this is. He needs to know what this is. And this is him telling the story about the second event.
It took a while before I realized that I was on the wrong road. And when I was still searching for my vantage point, where I had my first encounter, I recognized an orange glow in the distance. The same glow I saw 2.5 months before. I parked my car when the rain got even stronger, left it and climbed up the volcanic rock from which the orange glow shone through the fog. I got closer and closer before I reached the back of the hill and saw the object hovering on the other side, across and below me, and just 20 or 30 feet away. I hid myself. I was afraid to get closer. Sat there and did not believe my eyes. I could see everything, each detail of the ship, which was hovering there in the mists of the wood. One of the things I consider most important were my feelings. I had a mixture of emotions. I was very happy and afraid at the same time because I did not know what would happen. What happened was that I got to see the object very closely, and I was surprised and I wondered because the object was very beautiful. I could see the whole dome. On the surface it had several cavities. They ranged from very small ones to ones with a diameter of 5 feet, and there were many of them. I was very happy to see all this. I could also see the red spots the ship had, and I could also see that the red areas were brighter than the yellow ones. I did not have my camera with me, so I tried to impress every tiny detail into my mind. It was all very surprising. So I went over the details of the ship for 2 or 3 times, still with a mixture of feelings from fear to happiness. When all of a sudden I felt someone touching my shoulder, and when I felt the touch, I fainted. I knew I got caught. They knew I was observing them, so I was fainting. When I recovered, I first saw, and then I could hear, and at last I could smell. And what I smelled was the odor of the woods. And then I remembered what had happened. Once I remembered what had happened, I was shocked, because my clothes were completely dry. This meant that something else must have happened in between. Completely bewildered, I looked around. I looked down again to see the UFO, but it was not there anymore. It was completely dark already. I climbed down the hill on which I was, and I got to the road and finally to my car. It was difficult for me to find it, since there was no path down from the slope. Eventually, I got into my car and turned on the lights, when I realized that there was another car parked in front of me, about 30 feet away, a red Volkswagen Caribe. From there, a young man came out, walked towards me, and when I put my window down, the guy said, "Hello, how are you?" I replied, "Hello, I'm fine, thank you." And the man said, "If you want to know what you lived through this evening, I will wait for you tomorrow where the circuit in Ayusco divides in two. Be there at noon."
When I watched that, I was like, wow, okay. Red car, young man. This guy, Carlos, has seen these amazing ships that Roy has seen, these sudden connections. And I had an experience with a similar thing many, many years before, which it's too long to go into. So I'm trying to make these correlations, thinking this is just bizarre. Anyway, Carlos then talks about the friends that he's made on these crafts. So he has these continual interactions with them, and they're called plasma ships. Now, the plasma ships are alive themselves, and they can range in size. Once the pilot walks into them, he also becomes the light. And this is what Carlos describes.
Directly out of the light, slowly, part for part. Their body emerges out of this wall of light.
It was seen by hundreds of witnesses.
This is a craft that was videotaped over Italy. Superimposed on the top is the Carlos Diaz footage, and this is an actual moving craft. It's not photoshopped, it's not special effects.
The same details are visible as on the Diaz film.
This is a shot from below the craft, so he's looking at it flat.
Obviously dropped from the main craft, the same type of luminous
And they're dropping these orbs
regularly seen over
out of them. These balls of light.
Spheres of light are made from the same kind of energy the big ship is made of, light energy. Some are unmanned, some have 1 or 2 people aboard. Some of these spheres are white, others blue, others red in color. And they are probes or monitors to study the environment. They explore the different life forms and conditions on Earth, many things. They don't interpret, they just study and collect the data and emotions involved. Since they are energy, nothing can stop them. They can go through anything. They even come out of the rocks.
Ahora sí, siendo energía, no hay nada que los pueda detener.
Then he goes on to
It's a
explain
very big, dark cave.
another experience.
In some distance, a ship appeared and
This is actual
disappeared again
photography,
and
this is actual
again.
film that he
Just
videotaped, they
above one
allowed him to
great
take.
polished rock, nearly circular, on which an encarved image was clearly visible, a triangle surrounded by 3 circles.
A sign? The same symbol appeared in July 1991 in a wheat field near Barbury Castle, England. Its origin, like those of others of the mysterious crop circles, was never satisfactorily explained.
The triangle means the interaction between soul, body and mind, the harmony that should exist between these 3 states of a living being. And the small circles in every corner of the triangle mean the simple ring stands for nature, the circle of life. The one which looks like a wheel stands for movement. And the third one, the spiral, for the evolution of the consciousness of humanity, which in every mind grows like a spiral, and it altogether moves into a higher state. It was meant to teach me exactly what I felt. This is how my experience takes place. They don't talk to me much. They make me feel things and be aware of things. And that's how I've been learning.
And that's how I've been learning, and I'm sure that's how all of us have been learning. I have no doubt that the man I saw in Mexico in the photograph that I took was one of these pilots. And I have no doubt that the whole reason, the whole message I've been getting about the limestone caves and about these crop formations, these triangles with circles, was answering all the questions for me. I have no doubt that a ball of light came into our room and recorded my children and their reactions. I have no doubt that I was struck by one of these balls of light, and the beam that was going down and travelling down my spine was scanning me. It was getting every tiny piece of information. And I believe that that information is then kept for a time in the future where perhaps some of us might need to be rescued. So is this coincidence? I don't think so. You can't write a book on this stuff. We are all linked. The reason that you are sitting in the audience today now is because we are linked. We have shared experiences and we have work to do. These symbols are telling us, and what I'm told, my dream is, we don't have a lot of time and we need to start walking our talk. We are the teachers. Our experiences need to be shared with others because they need to have this information. There are no coincidences on this planet. We need to grow spiritually from these experiences, and it's everything that everyone's been talking about over the weekend, the meditation, the connecting with self, because at the end of the day, when we see these symbols and when we have these experiences and when we see things, it ignites these changes in our DNA. And that takes us from three-dimensional beings into multi-dimensional beings. And then we reconnect with home, and that home is the God energy that is within us. Nothing is outside of us. And it's really important that we start to walk our talk, which is what we're doing with Paula going up to North Dakota. It's important that we do this. But I'm going to leave the final words to Roy. We are the light. We are made of stars, and we need to break through that veil. We need to make a new world, but we have to make it. We have to make it. It's up to us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.